we finished up with our introduction to personal morality by looking at a little bit of theory here that has very good scientific support for it. And then we saw that above and beyond all that, it seems like we have an inclination to obey authority even when it seems to conflict with our personal morality. We always have to keep that in the back of our mind. Okay. Now, the last half hour is going to be given to the introduction of a decision-making tool. We're going to take all this material that we discussed for the past couple hours, theory and research, and bring it down to brass tacks. How can we use this in our work life? Just a little bit more about philosophy here. A little bit more detail about some of the terms that I introduced at the outset of the presentation. There are several different lenses or modes of ethical reasoning that are included in our decision-making model. And the first one is something called virtue. Sometimes it's referred to as character ethics. Virtues are a set of qualities that defines what a good person is, the characteristic that marks a person of character and integrity, a virtuous person. The great Greek philosophers thought that these existed within us, and they were just looking for expression. So we're not going to get into theological discussions, St. Augustine and St. Aquinas, whether discussions of original sin cover this territory. But virtue is basically, these are inherent characteristics that one has. You want to think about what a good person would do in a situation. Okay? What would a person of high moral character do in that situation? When you ask that question, what you're doing is you're looking at this grand tradition of character ethics, virtue ethics. Okay? Have you ever seen a sign, a bumper sticker, WWJD? Right? Character ethics. That's someone who's saying, I'm going to think about the person of moral fortitude, and I'm going to look at how they would make a decision in this case. It doesn't have to be a religious figure. It could be your mother, a person who just embodies these virtues that I list below. Trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, empathy, sympathy. Okay? They're innate. They're not learned. They come with you. They're inherent in your being. So it's interesting. When I hear someone talking about what I ask my students to develop a personal code of ethics. And oftentimes they'll say, be honest, be respectful. When you say be, I am. It's me, it's inherent. Those are virtues that I'm striving to really expose. Okay? So, again, when you're faced with an ethical dilemma, one question you want to ask is, what would a virtuous person do? A person who exhibits these characteristics. It's one way to do it. With every mode of ethical reasoning comes blind spots. You don't want to solely go through your decision-making process only consulting virtues, because there are problems that arise. In the case of virtue ethics is, if you're only thinking about what a virtuous person would do, after a while you may start thinking that you've got a monopoly on virtue, or you know what virtue is. And if you're not acting like me, then you're not virtuous. An arrogance, hubris, can develop. So again, this is one mode of ethical reasoning that you want to use. Based on a lot of theology and philosophy. Another approach is to consult principles. External sources of moral guidance. Okay? Take advantage of what you have around you. These are things that you've learned about good behavior. What have been the sources of learning? Now or in the past? Schools, churches, holy texts, right? The Policies and Procedures Manual, the state ethics law, right? The values statement for your organization, the code of ethics for your profession. Okay? External sources of moral guidance. A training seminar, you know, Aesop's fables, whatever it is, right? There are lots of sources of moral guidance that you can learn from. And the United States Constitution is a great source of principles. These aren't things, you know, I wasn't born knowing, yes, you know, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, Third Amendment, right? We learned them. Or the preamble, right? Or, you know, the code of ethics for my profession. I wasn't born knowing these things, like would be the case with virtue. These are things that you can learn about. Read the Constitution, the state, and as well as the national Constitution. Okay? Principles that are widely accepted in Western society include sanctity of life, justice, truth-telling. Right? These are things that are widely accepted in our sphere. So that's the second source of ethical reasoning. Virtues, number one. Principles, number two. The third is the one that very few of us actually use. When I ask my students to write up their personal code of ethics, very few of them talk about this as a mode of ethical reasoning. They actually shy away from this for reasons that I'll talk about in just a moment. Here, you don't go into an ethical situation saying, I'm always going to tell the truth. You're not going in with that principle, right? Honesty is the best policy. That's what I learned. Listen, George Washington and the cherry tree, I learned that story as a young child, and that's how I'm going to live my life. Okay? That's not the case when you're using the consequences or utilitarian approach. Instead, what you're going to say, what you're going to do here is look to and see what the outcomes of your actions are. So, theoretically, if I fudge the truth a little bit, but it brings the greatest good for the greatest number, that's the right thing to do. You get into pretty dicey territory here, right? In a law enforcement example, it could be, listen, I've got a drug dealer who is just destroying a neighborhood. We know he's dealing drugs. We don't have the goods on him this time. Should we plain evidence? He's destroying lives. People are dying in the streets because of this person. Okay? Do the ends, arresting this individual and getting him out of the neighborhood, justify the means? Falsifying evidence, wrongfully convicting an individual. You get into some pretty dicey territory here. Okay? Ends justifies. That's the blind spot here. If you're going to go through just looking at what the consequences are and not considering the means, well, that's problematic. However, you should consider the consequences. Okay? What's going to result from my actions? Well, that's important. Okay? Who's going to benefit? What provides the greatest good for the greatest number? Okay, it's usually a standard, one of the standards that's used by individuals. There's a lot of moral philosophy on this as well. Okay? You want this in your tool bag, but you don't want to rely on it solely. Right? You want to think about the consequences. This is really important in environmental context. See this all the time. Okay, let's see here. When you do the cost-benefit analyses and things like that, if we this is where DOT and DENR kind of knock heads, right? They want to build a road. They want to build a highway over here. It means that we're going to lose some wetland area, but it also means that we'll save state taxpayers money because it's the straightest point between two, and if they have to go around the wetlands, then they have to do all sorts of additional road work and bridge work. It costs the taxpayers a lot more money, but we save the wetlands. The commuters will save more time by having these things through the wetlands. DOT's telling us they can build the wetlands. Those kind of issues, right? So you're thinking about the consequences of the action, okay? And trying to weigh them, and then making a decision based upon the weighing process. Okay, we do that in ethics as well.